Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 136, the Baltimore Convention of 1843. As usual, my name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1947, in Fairfax, Virginia. I'll hand it off to Juan Sepulveda for his introduction.
Hello, everybody. Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Thank you, Juan. Robert Johnson.
Sorry, mute. Robert Johnson, Secretary of Waukegan Lodge 78, where I'm a past master and Masonic guy. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Missing other Johnson brother. We'll go right to Jason Richards.
Hey, everybody. Jason Richards here, Senior Warden of Acacia Lodge number 16 in good old Clifton, Virginia. Thank
you, Jason. And I'd like to add that this week, this episode of the Masonic Roundtable is brought to you by Edgar Gonzalez of MasonicRevival.com, a Masonic design company bringing you the latest fashion trends in Masonic accessories and regalia. Check out their newest neckties, aprons, and accessories at MasonicRevival.com. And it gets better. Use the promo code TMR, that's TMR, at MasonicRevival.com to qualify for free shipping. Who doesn't like that? Isn't it about time for a Masonic Revival?
Yes, it is, John.
Let's go right into Masonic news. The first thing and foremost I want to add is that the Mid-Atlantic Convocation of Academic Lodges did finally meet after months of me mentioning it on the air, and they had a great time. Here's just a few pictures that I wanted to share. We met at Gadsby's Tavern, downtown Alexandria, had a good time there. Met at the House of the Temple, and sat at Colonial Lodge, number 1821, for their stated meeting. A couple Grand Masters showed up. It was just a great first annual event. We'll definitely be doing something again next year. And just thanks to all those who organized it, and really had a good time. The decorum was great. The quality of the presentations was great. All around, A++, we'll buy again. Good. Now we're getting into the next topic, which is the Cedar Rapids Masonic Temple provides meals to first responders. Jason, did you find this one? Let's see.
I did. So this is just an interesting kind of feel-good article in Masonry. You know, there are so many articles that are bad news stories when it comes to Masonry, especially in the UK and Europe, where Masons are, behind conspiracy theories and their buildings are getting sold and God knows what else, arson and all of that fun stuff. But here was just something that I was had my attention drawn to, where because of the flooding in Cedar Rapids, the Cedar Rapids Masonic Temple actually opened their doors to provide meals to the first responders who were working to make sure that people were safe in Michigan. And that's it's a local story. It's one of the more local ones that we've shared on Masonic News, but it really shows the good-natured people who fill and comprise the membership of Masonic lodges. So I just thought it was neat.
Yeah, I agree. If you do any Google search for Masonic or Freemason in like Google News, you'll see a ton of charitable events, Masons helping out their local community. And it's something that, there's so much of it every week that we almost have to not talk about it. It's a good thing that it's so common that we have to really kind of pick and choose what we can talk about every week. And so this is just one of many examples. So kudos to those brothers who really serve in silence.
So normally we focus on the bad stuff, like the next article.
The bad stuff, like got a nice picture here. I don't know who did the artwork for this one, but
it's pretty sweet.
The Illuminati king has now been revealed to be Donald Trump.
Dun dun dun.
This guy can't get enough of Masonic news because, we had him as those naked statues in multiple cities in the America.
With the Masonic ring.
With the Masonic ring, of course. You can't have a conspiracy without a Masonic ring. Well, there's a new lawsuit that's out there that's filed against Donald Trump himself because they believe he is a would-be communist dictator and the king of the Illuminati.
Kelly, is it Kelly Weil who wrote this? Give me a call.
I've got some details.
You should read the first sentence because first sentence of this article is amazing.
At home,
Donald Trump is a communist, a member of the New World Order, and may have tangentially been involved in a plot to use wireless brainwave technology to coerce a Disney World alligator into killing a toddler. If the lawsuits against him are to be believed, that is.
Wireless brainwave technology.
This is almost. Oh, I mean to go, but it's as good. This is great.
Oh man.
As the official Disney World correspondent, I can say that there might be some truth to the alligator mind control. I don't know.
That's funny stuff.
No,
B flat and alligators. That's all I'm going to say.
Was that the brown note for alligators? What is that?
Oh, seriously, you play a B flat and they start making their noises. I don't know why.
Now I got to go look that up. I can't do the rest of the show now. I got to go see if that's true.
Sounds good.
Moving on.
We have not one but two past bastard articles. This is, we've had some off weeks where we haven't mentioned them, but there are some good ones this week. The first of which being a new hipster affinity lodge gives Masons the vintage organic granola experience. I could see this happening. The article basically talks about a fictitious, we hope, lodge that has guys in tight, skinny jeans and ukuleles and man buns.
Man buns.
Oh, and 8-bit trestle boards. Look at that. It's totally retro. I thought that was funny, but some of the comments that were shared on Facebook about it this week were like, I could kind of go along with some of that. Anyway, so thought that was amusing. And let's see, the other one we have, we were actually mentioned in.
What did we do to deserve that?
It's not the first nor last time, apparently. So thank you for those authors who are listening. What do we got here? We got one about the Freemasons nationwide. Law of the moon landing. 47 years too late.
Okay, so I actually thought, don't quote me on this, I actually thought this one was pretty funny just because it drives us all crazy when someone shares the news story about the Fellow Craft Club where the candidate got shot point blank in the face with a loaded gun. They're like, oh my God, this just happened. And it was 2011.
Check the timestamp on the article.
So I this hits me right in the feels.
So where do we get our shout out? Somewhere in there.
I think it was in the first paragraph.
About Masonic news. Okay, so there we are. So thanks. Good stuff. But yeah.
Buy a pin.
It's kind of one of those things too where I hate where this is just a little bit of a soapbox of mine when you really start to bring up the concept of Masonic education and you get people going, well, did you know George Washington was a Freemason? You're like, yes. Okay, let's get past that. I learned that a long time ago before I even got my degrees. What else is there? Well, did you know a bunch of presidents were Masons? Yes. It's old news at that point.
How is this related to anything we just talked about?
Red
old stuff back. Yes. The Red Skelton's pledge, right?
Red Skeleton Pledge. It's so amazing.
What does it have to do with Masonry?
Nothing.
Absolutely.
Well, there was this guy who was a Mason.
Okay.
Uh,
Enough of the soapbox. Jason, do you want to read this week's Masonic Monday question?
On Tuesday?
On Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay. And Nick, in his absence, didn't have one this week.
So our intern, Mike Hambrecht, jumped right on that shiz and just saved the day for us. So today's Masonic Monday question on Tuesday, since I don't know who the winners were last week, I'm just going to assume it was Christopher Croteau, Mike Hambrecht, Donnie Dillon, maybe Arnold Palmer, Marilyn Manson, and Robert Johnson. So congratulations to all of you who probably answered the question.
no, Donald Trump also won.
Illuminati King.
No, it was Donald Drumpf.
Oh,
Yeah, he used his real name. Anyway, this week's Masonic Monday question on Tuesday is, what lodge's minutes enjoy the distinction of being the oldest minutes to actually mention the conferring of the Royal Arch degree? Your bonus question is, name the famous Freemason who was raised not more than a month earlier than the date of those minutes. Send your responses to masonicmonday@gmail.com with your name and lodge number with the hashtag pitch or pinch hitter. Hashtag pinch hitter. Do not post the answer to Facebook. Don't email it to the TMR address. You probably won't get a response.
or they'll won't renew Luke Cage.
Dude, I've gotten through episode 4 so far.
Good show.
It's really good. Really, really good. Anyway, back to you, John.
I'm waiting for a show that you guys don't think is really good. Every time. Yeah.
Suicide Squad.
Like, okay. Duly noted. Moving on. Let's get to this week's topic, which is interesting and one I wanted to do some research on. And so this is on the Baltimore Convention of 1843. I've heard that in our past, our Masonic history in the United States, we had a large convention in Baltimore, which was controversial. So I wanted to see what was that all about. A good source who takes a lot of time in compiling the history of American ritual is this book right here, The Mason's Words, The History and Evolution of the American Masonic Ritual by Robert G. Davis.
Amazing book.
Very well researched, very well detailed, and there's about 10 pages or so of the Baltimore Convention specifically. So what I plan to do here is summarize this, just kind of walk through the flow of events. People chime in as you like and react to some of the things that may have come up. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then shortly after that, in December of 1839, the Grand Master of Alabama, a Grand Master by the name of John Hicks.
Hey, John, you need to back up a little bit further.
Even further?
What was going on in the 1820s and 1830s? So
We did an episode on that.
what have we done an episode on that necessitated a melding of the minds and a bringing of the Grand Lodges together, not only to unify and standardize some of their practices, but also to try to protect each other from the growing anti-Masonic sentiment
From
or
the some
synchronization.
kind of affair.
Yes,
What was it?
the Gorman affair.
The Sepulveda affair.
Yeah. Yes.
So the country was going through this turmoil where people were starting to become increasingly more suspicious of this secretive and discreet organization of the Freemasons at the hands of the disappearance and lack of evidence of a body of a so-called Billy Morgan.
So, it's, you know, it's, 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 it's fine. We make light of it here on the show, just with the context. But really, Freemasonry at this point in time is going through one of the roughest patches of its entire existence, at least in this country.
Right. I mean, lodges were shutting down. Grand lodges didn't know what to do. If you were a Mason, you were looked down upon. The first third party in America, the Anti-Masonic Party, was coming around. So obviously something needed to be done, to which in December of 1839, Grand Master of Alabama, John Hicks, proposed that all the Grand Lodges of the U.S. go to Washington, D.C. sometime in around March of 1842 to figure out how we can solve this issue, get some uniformity of our work. We have some guys who are trying to come in as posers and cowens, and just make sure that we all have the same rituals, so we have a standard, and we know that we're rejecting those who are trying to infiltrate the craft. So to which, the following year, or in March 7th of 1842, only a handful of representatives actually showed up, those being Connecticut, Virginia, Rhode Island, Maryland, New York, South Carolina, D.C., Massachusetts, Alabama, and New Hampshire. That is not all of the represented Grand Lodges that were in existence at that time.
There were 23 at that point, right, John?
Somewhere close to that, because I mean, there was a lot of them in their infancy as well. Some of them still forming, so it's hard to get a good count at the brief history. So a Virginia representative, John Dove, who at the time was the Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Virginia, was elected chairman. Why was he such a big deal? Well, he was a student of the Thomas Webb. So for those who are familiar with Masonic ritual in the United States, we have a Preston Webb, Preston-Webb. Those are two separate last names of men who influenced the craft. To learn more about Preston and Webb, read the Mason's words. But it's really neat because there is a good graphic in here that shows basically the lineage of the students. So in the same vein of Socrates taught Plato, that taught Aristotle, that taught Alexander the Great, here's a brief table that shows that Thomas Webb taught Jeremy Cross, who taught John Dove. So these were the roving ritualists that went forth and spread the good word of a uniform ritual. So John Dove, being a very meticulous person, was elected chairman because he knew the ritual the best. So their goal was to determine a uniform mode of work. They started looking at the lectures of all three degrees. They kind of hemmed and hawed and tried to come to some conclusions, but they quickly realized, due to the way that they were just representatives, the fact that there is no Masonic law that says that they had any right or authority to mandate anything new or uniform across the rest of the states. And even the representative from the Grand Lodge of Alabama, who thought up the whole thing, didn't even know the ritual well enough to speak to it. They said, okay, you know what? We need to hit the reset button on this. Let's go back to all the Grand Lodges and make sure that next year we're going to send skilled lecturers. So not just any representative, not just anyone with spare time. Next year, bring your A game. Bring those guys to come, and it's going to be twofold. We want to have those grand representatives, and also another outcome they wanted to have was a certificate of good standing required to travel to other lodges. Right? Again, just at the time, you could just walk into a Masonic lodge and say, "I'm a brother." You can kind of be tested out. There was no email system or phone system where you could call another grand secretary to vouch for a brother.
Right. You had patents essentially that you'd have to, that were this big that you folded up into, if you were lucky, a nice little wallet that you kept in your coat pocket.
Right. So we needed to have a uniform system, so that way from your Grand Lodge that you could say, look, this is my certificate of good standing. Oh, and by the way, people weren't paying their dues as well. Sound like a common thing even today. Back then, they were doing initiations, passings, and raisings on IOUs. So that was kind of messed up as well. Trust me, I'll pay you back later. So then they would travel around, not even being good standing from the start. It was a mess. However, they reconvened on May 8th in 1843, the following year, at the Masonic Hall in Baltimore, Maryland. And this time, there was a better showing. 16 of 23 Grand Lodges did send someone. And I found this kind of interesting. Pennsylvania did not. Even though Baltimore is literally a half-hour drive, or maybe a little bit longer horse ride to Pennsylvania, it's definitely an hour drive to.
Definitely longer horse ride, dude.
Hey, that's got my car has 1 horsepower.
Right.
But see, Pennsylvania was doing an Irish rite at the time, so they didn't feel like the Preston Webb thing was kind of in their job jar. They're special, and they still are. Louisiana also declined to send a representative for the reasons that we had when we had Mike Pole on the show. So check out our Louisiana episode,
La France,
where they were practicing the French rite. That's correct. And Kentucky, for some reason, I don't know why Kentucky didn't send a guy. But as usual, John Dove, again the Grand Secretary of Virginia, kicked it off, and their goal was to basically do two major things: have a uniform action so the landmarks may be preserved. Wait a minute, landmarks? Right, that they meant
what?
To define the landmarks and have them consistent. Where we've talked about landmarks in the past, what did we conclude about landmarks?
They're BS. Do I win?
You should winner, chicken dinner.
Yeah.
It just seems odd that, again, Mackey's Encyclopedia had already determined that there were these unknown, ambiguous, kind of rough-hewn landmarks, but yet they were trying to have uniform work, have consistency across the states. Noble idea. But that was their goal. That was their outcome. And also try to work out any other administrative details that they needed. If, how do we talk back and forth between Grand Lodges, that kind of thing.
Now, interestingly enough, John, part of the things that they discussed wasn't part of the things they discussed, the idea of a United States Grand Lodge at that point.
Right. So that came up in the discussions. So 43 was the big year where they had a lot on their plate. They looked at a lot of the rituals. But in addition, the administrative things were, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we had a Grand Lodge of the United States?
Right. But it was kind of like it was not going to be anything other than a national body that essentially settled quarrels between other Grand Lodges is kind of what it sounded like.
It was basically the Articles of Confederation on the Masonic level, right?
Yes. And that also would have helped the problem they had meeting the previous year, which was, well, how are we going to enforce this thing? That even if we agree, even this year, we don't have any governing body to enforce whatever we come up with. Even what we all agree with, there's nothing to mandate that.
It's like today, all over again. Back then again. I mean,
yesterday. 1843.
Well, it's interesting when you think about the idea of a national level Grand Lodge. You have to realize that location is critical here. Just as you see the variation among statewide grand jurisdictions. So I can only imagine how different Masonry in the United States would be had there been a national Grand Lodge instituted that actually had the power and the authority to govern.
It is interesting, right? I mean, I had briefly mentioned what maybe I kind of sort of thought maybe we should have a national Grand Lodge. And I think Chris Hodap, he didn't directly attribute anything on his website or anything, but I had maybe posted it or somebody did. He said, somebody always brings up this thought of a national Grand Lodge, and then he basically ripped my argument to shreds, which is totally cool because Hodap has that power and he's awesome. But yeah, he changed my mind about it. I think national Grand Lodge is just not a great idea. But back to the convention.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that's the other part of this is states' rights is a big thing, especially This is 1843, just years before our own Civil War. So states' rights and sovereignty of each Grand Lodge was a big deal, and so that quickly was shot down.
Right.
And so to pull that thread, one thing that was then proposed as an alternative, right? You don't come in with complaining about something unless you offer a solution. What they came up with was a thing called that we should have to keep state sovereignty. We should have a national convention every 3 years. And what's interesting is that artifact still consists today, also known as the North American Conference of Grand Masters. So I think that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
in 1843.
I think it's helpful to try to put yourself in the position of these brothers, at the very least on the Grand Masters and the Grand Officers of all the different Grand Lodges. Imagine if you were to hear, well, there are these 6 guys from these states who are thinking that there should be a sovereign ultimate grand mega lodge that governs over everybody. People are going to look at that with suspicion. Like, first of all, like, do they have an agenda? Are they seeking power? Are they seeking to create a structure that is top heavy in order for them to then have more control over everything? So that is something that, even if you were to propose that today, a lot of people will look at it with suspicion, regardless of what argument you were to posit in the defense thereof. So
that's why the Illuminati uses the unknown superiors, right? Because you can't have an ego if nobody knows you're the superior. Nobody cares. So that's what we need. We need unknown superiors.
That's why the Rosicrucians have the Invisible College. Absolutely. See, they're on to something. Okay, so their goal while they were there to uniform the work, they worked on 3 degrees, funeral ceremonies, consecration ceremonies, installation ceremonies, everything you could possibly want in Masonic ceremonies. But do you think they all agreed? What do you think? Yes, no? Okay, I'm seeing lots of shaking heads.
Everybody was all thinking along the same lines. They were of one mind. It was a very spiritual experience. And
you came New York.
Yeah, it was Woodstock like 100 years early, right. And it was amazing.
And then Isaac Hayes showed up as the Duke of New York, ace number 1.
Came in. Yeah, so had that been true, had alternate history happened and everyone agreed, we'd all have the same ritual in the United States. And for anyone who's traveled outside of your jurisdiction, I'm sure you know by now, the words are slightly different. So New York,
except in Pennsylvania,
where they're
obscenely different.
We love you, Pennsylvania.
We do.
Paul Chamberlain, don't send hate mail. The past Grand Secretary of New York, brother by the name of Ebenezer Wadsworth, was the lone dissenting voice of whatever they agreed upon for the first degree. He just had his feelings that he disagreed with what was said. So then they moved on to the second degree. Didn't like that either. He moved for an amendment that it be altered based on what they agreed upon. That amendment was rejected. He got no love.
Leave it to a guy named Ebenezer.
Yeah. Yeah, Scrooge coming in here to my convocation. So this is just one example of, I'm sure, many other conversations where you're getting guys from all over the country, different states, different histories, different backgrounds to come in and in 7 days try to knock all this out. As anyone who's ever been to a Grand Lodge function knows, that even the smallest amendment can be fought with fervor and zeal. I see a lot of nodding heads that just raising the dues $3.
No. Get this. This year, reporting from the door for a junior deacon. That's on the ballot. It takes up half the proposed amendments, half the book. It's like 16 pages. Every instance.
Oh, we've got a better one.
What do you got?
The Lewis Jewel.
Uh-oh.
We have here too.
We have a resolution on the books to where the Grand Lodge is basically saying it's okay to wear Louis Jewel.
Yeah, we have Louis Jewel.
But why does that need to be a resolution?
Yeah, that
If it's not forbidden,
we're missing
then
out.
it's okay.
Yeah, it's like, no, just go ahead. If you want to wear one, great. I think they're fantastic.
That's cool.
Uh,
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, it's like,
Now we gotta talk about it. Then we gotta talk about Nick behind us. But hey, Nick, welcome.
hey,
Bonjour. Bonjour. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Welcome to French Masonry. We will talk about Lord Baltimore.
grazie.
Thanks for joining us, Nick. I was afraid you wouldn't show, but I know that you've got a wealth of knowledge in that noggin of yours.
Somewhere. Hold on, I gotta shake it a little bit.
Shake
Don't
it
mess
up.
up your hair.
All right. So, of course, they talked about lots of good things for about a week, and they ended on May 17th of 1843 and kind of went back to their respective Grand Lodges. So, in order to preserve the decisions made and the agreements made, they wanted to actually form a committee to what they call make it a trestle board or a written copy of the lectures and other types of
So literally they did the most Masonic thing ever by having a committee that then read minutes.
Ah, it's funny the way you put that. So here's the crazy thing, though. It should have been done and done. They spent a whole week. They had consensus on most things, and all they need to do was write it down. Well, that was all well and good until John Dove, again, Grand Secretary of Virginia, saw the report, kept sending back rewrites and edits to the other two copywriters. The names I don't have at the ready. But basically, he was disagreeing with everything that they were sending back. And again, he's John Dove. He's, again, the student of Thomas Webb. So he thinks he has a little bit air of authority. And nonetheless, the other two copywriters go out and publish the trestle board. Well, how do you think John Dove treated that, where they just went ahead and published it without his final say, his final blessing? Not only did he not agree with it, he made it his personal vendetta to just campaign against this thing. And so, because of his Masonic weight that he carried, not literally, but figuratively, he went all out to shut this thing down. Some states adopted it, most did not. They respected his knowledge, his history with knowing Masonic ritual, and so because of that, at the end result is really they didn't get at all the outcome they had come to meet. The trestle board was never fully adopted across the states, and basically died on the vine within a few years. But wait, there's more. So that's as far as the ritual stuff goes. Meanwhile, while they were there, they did figure out a few things. The three major outcomes that they did agree upon, aside from the ritual, were, let's see, the first being that they clearly defined what the do-guards and signs were of the degrees. In English Masonry, they were kind of used interchangeably and really not consistent. So they just said, this is the do-guard and this is the sign of each of the degrees. They made that explicitly clear. The second thing they did was they switched the movable and immovable jewels. So I'm not going to go into too much into ritual there, but they were backwards from the way we know them today, and they flipped it around and said, no, these are going to be the movable jewels, and these are going to be the immovable jewels. And then finally, just a slightly non-controversial thing that they decided to do was, due to the fervor around the anti-Masonic period, they said, you know what? Let's just move all of our stated meetings up to the Master Mason level. Wow. That's huge. What do you guys think about that? Just that subtle, let's just change that to Master Mason.
So understand why they did it. William Morgan was allegedly an entered apprentice. There are several other notable entered apprentices who didn't progress and acted out their vendettas on the fraternity in different ways. So I understand that they wanted to shore up their guarding of the West Gate a little bit, because apparently, it was easy to initiate a guy, and then, once he was initiated, you found out that he wasn't necessarily who you wanted in the lodge. The sad part is that's still the case today in a lot of Grand Lodges, and I just think conducting business on the third degree is just so non-inclusive to those candidates who are coming in.
Yeah, think about this, right?
Well,
I mean, people are always like, "Oh, you got to be a master mason, go to the business meeting." These guys should really be master masons and do all that they can do in order to sit at the big boys' table. Like, dude, these guys pay bills at home. That's all you're doing. I
There's
mean,
no secrets of paying
no.
bills.
No, we're okay here.
Well, and it's kind of ridiculous when you really think about it. It's like these guys, I've seen it when I was a master and my lodge was still, we could do business on any degree, but my lodge never got the message. And it would be ridiculous to watch it was essentially like in a math problem when you have to put the parens around things and nest all this stuff. You'd watch these guys just struggle with all right, we opened on the third, and now we have to call down to the first. But then we got to go back to the third to close that because we already opened on the first.
We've got to go deeper.
I know. I'm sitting there going, dude, I got things to do. We literally just opened and closed 3 lodges tonight. I'm done. I'm going home early. Have fun, guys.
Yeah, well, it's like here in Illinois, we can open on whatever degree the people who are present. Like, if we have an EA present, we just open on EA. There's no going up to 3, then down to 1. It's just
Even
open.
for business meetings?
Even for business meetings.
Oh,
Yep.
That's amazing.
We can just open on 1, and that's it. We don't have to go up to 3, then down to 1 and invite them in, and then leave them and go back to 3. Nothing. We can just open on 1, come in, have fun, rock and roll.
In Virginia, paying bills is for master masons only.
That's sad.
Paying bills and reading minutes. 2 things that master masons only get to.
Why don't they just have it on the first degree, because then you can just deflate all their excitement early, right?
Yes.
Get them ready.
No, we want to get them hooked and get them through their degrees before they pop chocks.
Well, you know what? At first, I remember not understanding. I was like, "What's the point? Like, what is it? What really is happening in the meeting?" Like, when I finally got to see the meetings, I'm like, "Why keep everybody out?" Because you have these guys like waiting for a long time until the give back the catechism, or if they wanted to stay to have some supper or something. It's like, what's the point? Why are we keeping them out? It's not like, we're not using the words or this, maybe the sign. That's it. But I think back at like why it was decided to be changed to the third degree back then. It's almost like putting fences to protect whatever is happening on the inside. There had to be people that wanted to infiltrate into the fraternity too.
And so, yeah, I think there's a whole soapbox I could go on about how ridiculous that is. Even today, again, Virginia, it's still written to our laws, as Jason said, that we have to have our business meetings at their master mason level. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And again, you're excluding guys who would otherwise be good masons to hear the business, right? We understand we're not giving secrets away, but the business stuff, get these guys in early. So, what the other thing I wanted to add before we kind of roll into social media is one thing they did do well. I got to hand it to them. One of the last administrative things they were trying to do was the symbol of the blazing star, that they were going to change it to become the blazing star over Bethlehem, alluding to the the star over the Christ child. And fortunately, a lot of the representatives there understood the non-sectarian nature of Masonry and decided to say, hey, let's, before we start, going into a specific religion, let's back off on that. And they decided to kill that resolution. So they caught that early, but then left it Master Mason for 160 years.
Nada.
So that's it. That's how the Baltimore Convention ended. A little anticlimactic in the sense of the resolutions were the whole trestle board, as they called it, was not wholly adopted. If for anyone who travels, you'll still see the words are different depending on the jurisdiction, and we have ritualists that fight over the exact wording in your state, and it changes as soon as you cross the state line.
So we were talking in the green room before the show, and we said, so pretty much this is what would happen today too.
Yeah, we all get together and can't agree on a single thing. And egos get in the way, and
Yes, and nothing gets done.
Grand Lodges, they showboat, and
You pass the things that no one, is going to dissent on, like, a Lewis jewel, and you call it a day. It's like the modern day Congress.
lame duck Congress.
A lame duck Congress in perpetuity.
Yes.
Good stuff. I'm sure we'll have some final thoughts on that, but anything hot on social media there, Jason?
Yeah, we got a couple things. Folks are having some good discussions, so please go ahead and check that out. As always, we've got all the links that we talk about and the research that we do, both on the social media page as well as on www.themasonicroundtable.com, episode 136. But getting to the commentary that's going on in social media land, we've got Brother Scott Sherman, who mentions the Lewis jewel and says they've had that actually in Massachusetts for a good 10 years. And he proudly wears his with his Mother Lodge's past master jewel, since that's a lodge of both his he belongs to and his late father did as well. So that's really cool. The Lewis jewel is something that, it saddens me because, having a father who just doesn't have an interest in the fraternity whatsoever, it's his prerogative, but it is sad that if I were to ever get a chance to wear one, I'd have to wait another 18 and a half years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's an interesting question for you about Lewis jewels. I know I was late to the party, but now I brought my father into the fraternity. So does he have to wear the Lewis jewel, or does he wear the Clark jewel? Because Lewis and Clark. I've been trying to figure that out. Like, but it's like I sit there and go, I it's kind of weird. It's like I brought my dad in, and it's like this is so backwards now in this fraternity.
Who wears the Sacagawea jewel?
Oh, a Comic, apparently.
The
Yes.
marshal. The marshal wears it. He's the guide.
So I think it's written loose enough in our resolution to make it such that as long as you have that lineage, you're fully enabled to wear it.
I just think it's weird. Like I just thought that was a normal thing. Like, hey, your dad was a Mason, you get a Lewis jewel. Done. Nobody even says anything about it. That's just weird. I don't know.
Next resolution, lapel pins. You have to have a certain number of size, quantity, color, and to make sure you get your TMR
Like the
lapel
old
pin.
Setting Mall podcast, right?
Yeah.
So Brother Mike Hambrecht, our faithful TMR intern, says he understands the rationale moving toward or moving back to this discussion on doing lodge business with the Master Mason degree. He understands why they first did it, but he doesn't quite understand why it's stuck around as long as it has. And I have an answer for that, which is bureaucracy. It's always been this way. Why would we change it?
As we say so.
Yes, exactly. And Brother Justin Miller agrees with RJ from something that RJ said about 5 or 10 minutes ago, and I can't remember what it was. And that's all we've got really for social media tonight, John.
Hey, thanks for agreeing with me. Most people don't. You're the man.
Remember this date and time, guys.
Well, I'm writing it down, man.
No, it was about being able to do business on any degree based on the level of the folks who are in the room.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You agree with me. You agree with Illinois. Yeah, Illinois Masonry.
Yes.
And Minnesota.
And Minnesota.
But not Virginia.
Right. Alrighty. Is that it, Jason?
Yeah. Let's go.
Moving in to our final thoughts. Latecomer, but handsome guy, Nick Johnson. What have you got for final thoughts?
All right, I know I was a late comer to this one. I was hoping to be here earlier, but it's kind of
Better
funny.
late.
Exactly. But the ritual aspect has always been fascinating to me with this Baltimore Convention, and that's only because it's been this strange obsession within the fraternity, and it's not just Webb who was trying to standardize, from Preston who was trying to standardize. There's this constant obsession in the fraternity to standardize our working, because there's this assumption that cookie cutter is better because all of us are getting essentially the same information. And I, for one, am glad that ultimately this and the conservative movement and any other movement that has pushed a standard ritual style fails. I know I'm saying that I like when Masons fail, and I say that because there's a beauty within each of these systems. Like when you were discussing the Star of Bethlehem, there was a discussion, at least in some, if you look at different rituals, that still exists in a quieter discussion. There's other parts to this ritual that have remained. There's fragments here, there's reorganizations there. And all those reorganizations essentially show you that you can tease out different parts in almost the exact same ritual just to provide a different perspective. And when you've got 51 jurisdictions times 2, and then subtract some in the United States alone, add that with all the other worldwide jurisdictions, you're sitting with thousands of different grand jurisdictions. Information that's essentially the same is almost always essentially different, and it's beautiful. And so I, for one, am glad that they failed. Thank you. I have a blog, Millennial Information Doc.
Thank you, Nick. Let's go to the other brother Johnson, Robert.
So I learned a lot. Big thanks to John for being the SME on this one. I really appreciated it. Learned a lot. I found it fascinating, that things like Nick was mentioning, they tried to really put this standard ritual, into place, all across. And there's talk is so that we all know, and I'm sure that's part of it. I think there's some driving force of that. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there's something to focusing on the thing that can be written and defined, right? Because Masonry is so many things to so many different people. But if you all have this one thing that you can focus on and it's clearly written and defined, it gives, the average Joe, the average active Mason, something to focus on and something to harp on and something to work toward. That maybe keeps them in Masonry while there are other Masonic conversations happening, not so focused on just the ritual. Take that for how you want to take it. But I loved it. It was awesome. And that's all I can say. So with that, if you like Masonic podcasts, check out Whence Came You. It's 9:30 on Sunday nights this upcoming week. We've got Adam Thayer on the program, who reads a really good paper. And I will probably go live a few times while I'm at Grand Lodge, which will be fun. We're going to record an episode in the car with Worshipful Brother Scott Duvall, is an education officer in my district. And I'll have more details coming up about January. I'll be at the Austin Club in Austin, Texas, with University Lodge, doing a presentation out there, which is going to benefit their big children's charities out there in Texas. So it's a really big deal, and I'm really looking forward to it. So more details on that later. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Robert. Although you won't be the first one to do a traveling podcast. I know Juan had done a few early episodes of the Years.
And to that, it was so amazing because I actually listened to those on the way to Kentucky, and I felt like Juan was in the car with me. It was so funny because you could hear the background of their car and my car at the same time. It was awesome.
I was there with you.
You were. You really were.
Although you're not the first, I challenge you to be the fastest. So if you can be the fastest podcast in a car, game on. Speaking of awesome podcasts, Juan Sepulveda.
Well, thank you for that, brothers. It was an interesting topic. I read a few articles trying to wrap my head around about like what really happened. There were some unanswered things. Like I really wanted to know why New York dissented. Like what did he find objectionable about the proposed changes? And of course he couldn't handle the pressure because ultimately he had to bow out, and whatever happened without his intervention. So I'm curious to learn more about it. If any brothers have links that have answers, or they have, even if you have conspiracy theories, just state them as so. Don't pass them as truth, but post them on our Facebook page, because I think it'll be interesting to learn more about like what did he find so objectionable that he was willing to say, okay, I'm out. So it was very interesting. I found a lot of parallels with the way things are handled today. I try to put myself in their shoes. What things would I try to do in order to protect the fraternity? And just to put some perspective, like it's not like, oh, well, people's opinion of Masonry was negative. I mean, this is something that was affecting people's livelihood. If you were found to be affiliated with Masonry, you could have, your career could be in jeopardy. So you had brothers by the thousands demitting, and you had lodges by the thousands handing back their charters. So like this was very, very dire moment for our fraternity. So, what would you do? Would you be one of those guys that stood up and actually said, I have to do something about this? And think about what the equivalent of that is today. Like, what are the things that are really putting our fraternity in peril? And are you going to be one of those brothers that stands up and does something about it? Not just complains, because like we don't need any more of those. What is your proposed solution? And man up and head it. So that's what I got from this episode. And I hope that brothers take that to heart. If there's something like that you think needs to change in the fraternity, that you can improve upon it, come with a plan, and we'll be happy to hear you. So thank you all the brothers that support the Masonic Roundtable. And one of the ways that you can do so is by participating and sharing our videos, sharing our audio with brothers that perhaps might not know about this show. There's many brothers who don't. So thank you again for listening. And if you like podcasts that come out in a monthly pace, I try to put together an episode for you. I have some in the can that need a few more tweaks before I publish them. I can't give you a date, but stay connected with thewindingstairs.com and check out the new t-shirts that are creating some ripples. Go to thewindingstairs.com for more info.
Very handsome. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, brother.
Speaking of changing things, Jason Richard.
Speaking of changing things, what?
We're going to go down to Grand Lodge and shake some things up this year.
No, not this year. So anyway, sorry.
Notice he said this year.
Not this year. Well, the resolutions had to be in by last year. So maybe next year. Maybe next year I'll have some fun. So anyway, Baltimore Convention of 1843, really interesting piece of Masonic history. And it just goes to show that hard times really force people to get together and try to play nice. And I think there was a lot that was actually accomplished. Of course, it didn't go as far as the brethren who originally thought up the concept of this big convention wanted. But at the same time, had they persisted in complete standardization of the ritual and the formation of a nationwide Grand Lodge, Masonry today would be a lot different, and I don't know if it'd be for the better. One of my favorite things to do while traveling is to just soak in the ritual and the differences. And it's just a wonderful experience. So for any brethren watching or listening, I just recommend that you just travel outside of your jurisdiction whenever you can, because the ritual is somewhat varied, but always incredibly interesting to hear little pieces that aren't there, little pieces that are new to you. I remember sitting in on a Master Mason degree in Nebraska, in Omaha, and there was a soliloquy that was added somewhere, and it was the most gorgeous stuff I have ever heard. It was just absolutely wonderful, and it's something that I had never ever heard before in any of the jurisdictions I had visited. So do yourself a favor. You owe it to yourself to go and visit and explore other lodges, other cultures, and other rituals. And we have, in some ways, the grand or the convention of 1843 to thank for the fact that, okay, so we can go to any number of jurisdictions and they're all mostly similar with the exception of Pennsylvania. So you kind of know what's going on, and or at least can follow along. But we have the aftermath of the convention of 1843 to thank for the beauty that is the variations in the ritual across the United States. So with that, back to you, John.
So I'm going to be the dissenting vote here, right? While I agree, you learn something new every time you travel cross-jurisdictional. It's such a pain to think about, well, the first time you do that, well, what's wrong with my ritual? Like, I was taught that this was the right words to say, and I go over here, and these guys are using completely different words, and which one's better? Which one's right? I mean, that's gone through my head. That, well, what am I missing? And I'm biased because I'll say that I think based off of the places I've traveled, I like Virginia ritual the best, but it's kind of one of those, you're born into it, so you have a bias toward it. There's one little thing, I think we do our aprons wrong, but that's a different conversation for another day. But back to the point, the big shocker for me was something I had read a couple months ago, was about that was when the Grand Lodges all agreed, let's meet at the Master Mason level. And that has just been on a whim. It was based off of the events at the time, and that has not been revisited in 160 years. This is just insane that this arbitrary benchmark was set. And I'm gonna say it. It's time for another big national convention, not the convention of Grandmasters, but one where we have representatives to talk this thing out and say, look, we're losing members, right? We have a membership problem. That's my big stick. That's a very easy thing we can change in our laws today. Grandmaster edict can say, congratulations, we can enter apprentice degree openings and do business on that until we get the things formally changed in our bylaws, and we'll hopefully engage the craft sooner before they leave. In other jurisdictions like Canada, they see a sharp decline of those who progress from EA to fellowcraft and fellowcraft to Master Mason. They have data to show that these guys aren't finishing their catechisms. That's a very simple thing based off of a 140 plus, 160 plus year arbitrary decision that we could change right now and to hopefully improve the craft. I'm jealous of you guys who can just decide to choose which level of the meeting that you decide to open on, but yet other states like Virginia have a little ways to go. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. Thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night, everyone.